Welcome to American Legacies, where we explore incredible stories of the people who shaped the nation. From founders like Benjamin Franklin to creators like Walt Disney, barrier breakers like Rosa Parks, to stars like Frank Sinatra. Whether they led revolutions, inspired generations, or changed the course of history, their stories are woven into the fabric of America. Join us as we uncover the triumphs, struggles, and legacies of the heroes of our country. Let's get started. Roger Sherman was a colonial American statesman and a pivotal yet often underappreciated founding father of the United States. He is unique in American history as the only person to have signed all four of the major documents of the Revolutionary era: the Continental Association, the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, and the U.S. Constitution. He rose from humble beginnings as a shoemaker to become a leading voice in the creation of a new nation. Known for his steady wisdom, Sherman devoted the last 3 decades of his life to public service. This episode explores the life and legacy of this forgotten founder. Roger was born on April 19, 1721, in Newton, Massachusetts. He was the second of 7 children in a family of modest means. His father, William Sherman, was a farmer and also worked as a maker of shoes and leather goods, and he taught young Roger the shoemaking trade from an early age. Growing up on a colonial farm, Roger likely had many chores and limited formal schooling. In fact, Sherman never attended college and only went as far as the local grammar school in his youth. However, he made good use of his father's library and was mentored by a local minister, Reverend Samuel Dunbar, who had attended Harvard College. Through voracious reading and guidance from Dunbar, Sherman gained a solid education in literature, math, religion, and law. This combination of farm work, craftsmanship, and self-study in his youth instilled in Roger a breadth of knowledge that would serve him throughout his life. Roger's aptitude for math was evident early on. He had a natural ability with numbers. By his late teens, he was using his math skills for practical ends, learning to measure land and draw maps. This self-taught expertise soon opened doors for him beyond the shoemaker's bench. Roger's early years were not without hardship. At age 19, his father William passed away, an event that thrust the young man into a position of responsibility. As the dutiful son, Roger took charge of settling his father's estate and caring for his mother and siblings. This loss became a turning point in Sherman's life and prompted a major change in scenery and opportunity. 2 years after his father's death, 22-year-old Roger moved with his mother and siblings from Massachusetts to the frontier town of New Milford, Connecticut. They relocated to join Roger's elder brother, who had established himself there. The move marked Sherman's entry into a new community where his skills were in demand. He carried with him his trade of shoemaking and soon opened New Milford's first shoemaker shop in partnership with his brother. The hardworking young man quickly became known in town as someone of many talents and keen intellect. Roger's proficiency in surveying earned him respect and income in Connecticut. Barely 2 years after arriving in New Milford, the 24-year-old was appointed the official surveyor of New Haven County and later of Litchfield County. This position was an important one for a young man with no formal college education, and it provided him with a steady income and widening reputation. As county surveyor, his accurate land surveys helped facilitate local development and land transactions. The job also allowed him to purchase some land of his own, giving him a stake in the growing community. During his 20s, he began to immerse himself in civic life. He actively participated in New Milford's town affairs, serving at one point as the town clerk. In addition to shoemaking and surveying, he expanded into mercantile trade. He opened a general store that sold furniture, tools, and household goods, everything from tables and chairs to brooms and razors. Despite his many day jobs, Roger continued his intellectual pursuits and became a publisher of almanacs. Much like his contemporary Benjamin Franklin, who published Poor Richard's Almanac, Sherman produced yearly almanacs filled with practical information and commentary. In Roger's almanacs, one would find astronomical data, weather forecasts, dates of religious festivals, and even his views on the colony's currencies. All the while, Roger was setting his sights on the field of law and public office. He studied law on his own in whatever spare time he could find, reading legal books by candlelight after long work days. His perseverance paid off. At the age of 33, he passed the bar exam in Connecticut and was admitted to practice law. This was a remarkable achievement for someone with no formal legal schooling, and it immediately elevated Sherman's status in colonial society. Within a year of becoming a lawyer, Sherman's neighbors elected him as a justice of the peace and as their representative to the Connecticut General Assembly. Over the next decade, Roger served multiple terms in the colonial legislature, gaining valuable experience in governance. He also earned a reputation as a fair-minded justice of the peace, addressing local disputes and legal matters. By his mid-30s, he had transformed himself from a humble craftsman into a respected lawyer, merchant, and public official. Amidst the busy start of his career, he also started a family. He married Elizabeth Hartwell in 1749. Sherman was 28 and establishing his life in New Milford when he married Elizabeth. The young couple would go on to have 7 children together. Roger was a devoted family man, and his letters suggest he took seriously his role as a provider and a father. Tragically, not all of these children survived infancy, which was a common hardship in the 18th century. The 3 eldest sons of Roger and Elizabeth, John, William, and Isaac Sherman, later served as officers in the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War. His first wife Elizabeth died in October 1760, shortly after giving birth to their last child. Her death left Roger a widower with a large family of young children to raise. He temporarily stepped back from some of his public duties, resigning from the legislature and moving his family to New Haven to start fresh. He opened a new store near Yale College and focused on being both father and breadwinner. It wasn't long before Roger found love again. As the story goes, one day he saw a woman as he passed her on the road. The 41-year-old was so taken with 20-year-old Rebecca as she walked by that he turned his horse around to ride back and introduce himself. The courtship blossomed quickly. Roger and Rebecca married in 1763. Despite their age difference, the marriage was evidently a happy and fruitful one. Rebecca Prescott Sherman bore 8 children with Roger, bringing his total number of children to 15 from his 2 marriages. He had a bustling household, and one can imagine his home was full of activity. He was known to be a man of faith and was deeply involved in his church, which likely provided support to his family as well. In fact, he was so respected in religious circles that he engaged in lengthy correspondence with prominent theologians of the time and was often referred to as a professor of religion in the community, a term indicating a devout lay leader. By the 1760s, Roger had established himself as a leading citizen in Connecticut, juggling roles as a legislator, judge, and merchant. The political climate in those years was heating up. Britain's imposition of taxes and trade restrictions on the colonies galvanized colonial resistance. The rising tide of British overreach did not fail to capture his attention. When Parliament passed the Tea Act, effectively privileging the British East India Company and undercutting colonial merchants, Sherman openly declared his belief that no laws bind the people but such as they consent to be governed by. His outspokenness on such issues earned him greater esteem among Connecticut patriots. Thanks to his strong credentials, Roger was elected as one of Connecticut's delegates to the First Continental Congress. He was 53 and entering the national stage of politics for the first time. At the Congress, Sherman joined other colonial representatives in a unified response to British policies. In late 1774, he signed the Continental Association, an agreement among the colonies to boycott British goods as a form of economic protest. He proved to be an effective delegate, sober, hardworking, and devoted to the cause of defending colonial rights. When the Revolutionary War erupted, he continued his service in what became the Second Continental Congress. There, amid the debates over independence, Sherman emerged as one of the steady voices. Colleague John Adams later recalled that Sherman was one of the most sensible men in the world, blessed with the clearest head and steadiest heart. He was no fiery orator, and reportedly had a plain, sometimes awkward manner when addressing Congress. But what he lacked in polish, he made up for in substance and diligence, earning the respect of his peers. Roger was a tireless worker in Congress. He was said to rise every morning at 5 a.m., start his duties by 7, and labor until 10 at night. This work ethic meant he was involved in many committees and tasks crucial to the war effort. He took on responsibilities, ranging from procuring supplies for the Continental Army to managing Native American affairs and overseeing the fledgling postal service. At age 55, he reached the pinnacle of his revolutionary career. He was appointed to the famous Committee of Five, tasked with drafting the Declaration of Independence. Along with Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and Robert Livingston, Roger helped shape the Declaration's content and boldly signed the final document proclaiming American independence. The following year, Sherman was selected for another vital assignment. He served on the committee to draft the Articles of Confederation, America's first constitution, making him one of the document's architects. Throughout the Revolutionary War, he remained in Congress whenever possible, helping to guide the Patriot cause. He even signed the Treaty of Paris, the peace agreement that officially ended the war with Britain and secured American independence. At the same time, he never neglected Connecticut's governance. During part of the war, he served on Connecticut's Council of Safety and as a judge. The states, now united, faced the challenge of forming a more effective government. The Articles of Confederation had proven too weak to address the nation's problems. Calls went out for a convention to revise the Articles, and 66-year-old Roger was once again called upon. Despite his age, he was one of the oldest statesmen present, second only to Benjamin Franklin. Sherman attended the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia as a delegate from Connecticut. At the convention, delegates quickly decided to scrap the Articles and draft an entirely new constitution, a move that initially surprised and concerned Sherman. True to his conservative instincts, he was wary of creating a too powerful central government. He spoke out against proposals that, in his view, gave excessive power to populous states or to a new national executive. For example, at first he opposed having any part of the national legislature be directly elected by the people, fearing that large states would dominate and overwhelm the smaller states' interests. He was also uneasy about plans for a strong presidency. Nevertheless, he was also a pragmatist. When it became clear that a majority of delegates favored a new federal system, he shifted from resistance to constructive engagement. He decided, as a voice for the smaller states, to work within the framework of the new Constitution and fight to protect the rights of those states. Sherman's most celebrated contribution at the convention was the proposal known as the Connecticut Compromise, often called the Great Compromise of 1787. The convention was deadlocked for weeks over the issue of legislative representation. Large states wanted representation based on population, while small states, like Connecticut, insisted on equal representation. The debate grew so heated that by one account the convention was on the verge of dissolution, scarce held together by the strength of a hair. Roger, together with fellow Connecticut delegate Oliver Ellsworth, offered a solution that broke the impasse. Sherman's plan ingeniously blended the two approaches. He proposed a bicameral legislature with a House of Representatives apportioned by population and a Senate in which each state had an equal vote. This dual system of representation balanced the power between large and small states and ultimately helped save the convention from disintegrating. After intense deliberation, Sherman's compromise was adopted by a very narrow margin. It became the foundation of Congress as we know it today, and thus one of Sherman's greatest legacies. He didn't stop there. He contributed to other aspects of the Constitution's drafting, consistently advocating for practical, experience-based solutions over abstract ideals. He once cautioned a more theoretical delegate, saying, "Philosophy may mislead you. Ask experience," encapsulating his down-to-earth approach. Sherman took a firm stance on the contentious issue of slavery and representation. He was personally opposed to slavery and pushed for a rule that only the free inhabitants of each state be counted when determining representation in Congress. His aim was to prevent slaveholding states from inflating their population numbers, and thus their power in the House of Representatives, by counting enslaved people who had no rights. This debate eventually resulted in the 3/5 compromise, where each enslaved person would count as 3/5 of a person for representation. While not the outright ban on slave counting that Sherman wanted, it at least limited the political advantage of slaveholding states. Throughout the convention, he earned a reputation as America's first great compromiser, constantly working behind the scenes to broker deals that kept the delegates united. His steady hand and willingness to seek middle ground were crucial in hammering out the final document. In September 1787, Sherman proudly added his name to the new U.S. Constitution, cementing his role as a founding architect of the Republic. After the Constitutional Convention, Roger returned home to Connecticut, but his respite was brief. The new Constitution had to be approved and implemented, and Sherman's work was not done. In 1788, Connecticut ratified the Constitution, due in part to his strong support. The next year, the first federal Congress convened, and the now 68-year-old Sherman was elected to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives for Connecticut. Despite his age, he threw himself into the job of launching the new government. He was part of the first Congress that tackled setting up the executive departments, the federal judiciary, and the Bill of Rights. Though James Madison largely took the lead in drafting the Bill of Rights, Roger was involved in early discussions about what rights to include. He only served 2 years in the House, because in 1791 he was tapped by the Connecticut legislature to fill a vacancy in the Senate. At age 70, he became a U.S. Senator. There, he aligned with the emerging Federalist faction in support of President George Washington's administration. A staunch fiscal conservative, Sherman strongly backed Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton's financial program in Congress. He voted in favor of the federal assumption of state debts from the Revolution, supported the creation of a national bank, and approved tariffs to protect American manufacturing. These measures were key components of Hamilton's plan to stabilize the new nation's economy, and Sherman's support helped them pass. This might surprise those who knew him as initially wary of central power, but it underscores that by the 1790s he believed a stronger union was necessary for the country's prosperity, a belief born out of experience. In his 70s, Sherman was still applying his favorite maxim: trust practical experience over abstract theory. By 1792, Sherman's health was starting to decline. He had spent so many years in continuous public service that it had taken a physical toll. In early 1793, illness compelled him to leave Congress and return home to New Haven. That summer, he died at the age of 72. The cause was recorded as typhoid fever. His death marked the end of an era. He was one of the last surviving members of the Continental Congress generation. His passing was widely mourned in Connecticut and beyond. His funeral in New Haven was reportedly attended by a great many people from all the walks of civic life he had touched: local townsfolk, church members, Yale College community, where he had served as treasurer for years, fellow judges, and political colleagues. After a lifetime of service, Roger Sherman was laid to rest, having helped build the governmental framework of the United States. Roger Sherman's legacy is one of tireless public service, common sense statecraft, and a knack for forging compromise. Yet, despite his monumental contributions, Sherman is often called the forgotten founder. He didn't become as famous as peers like George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, or Alexander Hamilton, figures who have been lionized in popular culture and history books. There are a few reasons for this relative obscurity. Sherman never sought the spotlight and never served as president or military hero. Instead, he was a legislator and negotiator, working often behind the scenes. In appearance and style, he was modest and unassuming. In a room of brilliant orators, Sherman spoke plainly with a Yankee twang and sometimes stumbled over words. Unlike Jefferson or Paine, he did not produce dazzling prose for the masses. However, Among the Founding Fathers themselves, Sherman's contemporaries held him in the highest regard. Thomas Jefferson's lofty compliment, that Sherman never said anything foolish, speaks to the New Englander's reputation for level-headed wisdom. Fellow New Englander, Fisher Ames, once remarked that if he was ever absent for a congressional vote, he felt safe voting however Mr. Sherman did, for he always voted right. Sherman was routinely entrusted with important responsibilities throughout his career, from drafting foundational documents to managing wartime logistics, precisely because he was so capable and reliable. John Adams, despite ribbing Sherman's oratory, also acknowledged him as one of the most sensible men around. He was a pillar of wisdom and stability among the Revolutionary generation. Sherman's life also offers some inspiring takeaways for history enthusiasts today. First, his story highlights the power of self-education and perseverance. Sherman had little formal schooling and started as a manual laborer. Yet through reading, curiosity, and determination, he became a leading lawyer and lawmaker. He never let lack of pedigree stop him, an American ideal if ever there was one. Second, Sherman exemplifies integrity and public service. He approached issues practically and earnestly, guided by a sense of duty and faith. Third, Sherman's role as the broker of the Great Compromise teaches the importance of compromise and balance in politics. Finally, his relative obscurity reminds us that history sometimes overlooks those who work quietly, but effectively. In the end, Roger Sherman's legacy is carved into the very structure of the United States government and the founding documents that define it. His story enriches our understanding of the American founding by shining light on a figure who preferred results over rhetoric. His life reminds us that the American Revolution and the birth of the Republic were collective enterprises requiring not just fiery visionaries, but also steady, even forgotten heroes. Thanks for listening in on our journey into the fascinating life of Roger Sherman. Join us next time as we consider another of our country's greatest treasures here on American Legacies. See you then.